October 20th, 1972. A man stumbles out of the mountains. He's barefoot, covered in rags. His face is swollen from sunburn, his lips cracked open. When a Chilean farmer sees him, he hesitates. Is it a ghost? A lunatic? Or something worse? The man says, "I'm from the plane that crashed in the Andes." The farmer stares at him. That crash had happened 72 days ago. Everyone was presumed dead. There were funerals, obituaries, headlines. But this man and one other had walked across the Andes in the middle of summer blizzards, surviving by drinking melted snow and eating human flesh. It took weeks for the full truth to emerge. The missing passengers had been alive for over 2 months, freezing, starving, surrounded by corpses. When the food ran out, they made a pact. They would eat the bodies of the dead. And they did. Not out of madness, not out of instinct, out of faith, out of reason, out of the will to live. When the public found out, the reaction wasn't shock, it was disgust. Religious leaders called it sin. Journalists called it inhuman. And survivors were forced to defend the most intimate horror a human being can carry. That's the story behind Alive, the book that made the world stare into a mirror and ask, would I have done the same? The book is called Alive, the story of the Andes survivors. Written by British author Piers Paul Read and published in 1974, it is not a novel. It is a brutal piece of nonfiction, a reconstruction, a confession, a dissent. The publisher warned readers that they might vomit, that they might cry, that they might not finish. But the book sold millions of copies. It was translated into dozens of languages. It haunted airport shelves and personal libraries for decades. Why? Because it wasn't just the story of cannibalism. It was the anatomy of what it means to survive. It stripped away civilization, comfort, and convention, and asked what remains. What matters when everything else is gone? Piers Paul Read was chosen for a reason. He wasn't sentimental. He wasn't trying to inspire. He believed in showing the facts even when they smelled like blood. He interviewed every survivor. He documented the hunger, the infections, the moral collapse, the frozen limbs, the moment they took a knife to the corpses. The book was praised by critics, but condemned by many religious institutions. Some bookstores refused to sell it. Schools banned it. Families who had lost loved ones in the crash begged people not to read it. But the world read it anyway. Alive is not a comfortable read, but it is a necessary one, because it dares to tell the truth about what humans become when all they have left is cold, hunger, and each other. But to understand why this book still scars readers today, we need to go back into the mountain, back into the wreckage, back inside the story. The idea that horrifies people the most is not death. It's not even cannibalism. It's choice. That moment when a living person decides, I will cut into the body of someone I loved, and I will eat it. In Alive, this choice is not made in one dramatic scene. It creeps in. It arrives slowly, like frostbite, silent, then painful, then irreversible. First, the survivors try to eat toothpaste, then leather, then cotton from the seats. They boil snow, they scrape crumbs, they pray, but nothing fills the stomach. Nothing keeps them warm. Eventually, one of them breaks. He says what everyone has been thinking. We can eat the dead. And the silence that follows is not horror. It's relief. They make rules. They won't eat family. They won't eat women. They will cut only what's necessary. They will use skin and muscle, never organs. They will call it food, not flesh. But the plane has crashed with several dozen people on board. As days pass, the line between ritual and repetition blurs. Bodies are carved like animals. Strips of flesh are laid out to dry. Bones are cracked for marrow. And in the middle of it, there are still birthdays, prayers, arguments, laughs. Life continues. That's the most disturbing part. These are not monsters. These are young men, sons, brothers, athletes, believers. The dangerous idea of alive is that humanity and horror don't cancel each other out. They coexist. They sleep side by side, in each of us. When Alive was released in 1974, it was immediately swallowed by a media storm. Not because of the writing, not because of the author, but because people couldn't stop talking about what they would have done. The headlines didn't call it a survival story. They called it the book where they ate each other. Talk shows invited priests, scientists, and psychologists to debate whether it was moral. Radio hosts asked children what they'd do in a plane crash. Churches condemned the book as glorifying sin. Some priests even accused it of normalizing cannibalism. But the survivors were all Catholic. They had prayed every night. They had asked for forgiveness. The Vatican remained silent. But local clergy across Latin America warned their flocks not to read the book. It was spiritually dangerous. At the same time, medical experts praised the book as an honest exploration of human limits. Survival schools used it as a teaching tool. Philosophers debated whether civilization is real or just a thin layer. The book also reopened old colonial wounds. In Europe, the idea of savage survival was often projected onto indigenous people. Now it was white, Catholic, middle-class young men, the sons of lawyers and doctors, who had eaten human flesh. That reversal made people uncomfortable. It forced them to admit something terrifying. Under the right conditions, anyone is capable of anything. Alive is not just about hunger, cold, or the trauma of disaster. It's about the collapse of illusion. The illusion that we are better than others, more civilized, more moral, more human. The young men who survived were not criminals. They weren't soldiers. They were rugby players, students, Catholics. Yet when stripped of society's structures, they made a choice that most of us find unthinkable, and they lived with it. That's what disturbs us. Not that they did it, but that maybe, just maybe, we would too. That we are not so different. That civilization is a performance. That morality can shatter. The book also forces a question that society hates to answer. Who deserves to live? And why? Some passengers died because of injuries. Others froze. But not all deaths were accidental. As the days dragged on, the group began to make decisions. Who was too weak to go on? Who could be spared? Who could be sacrificed? In that sense, Alive is not just a survival story. It's a test of our modern myths about equality, compassion, justice. And it leaves us with an unbearable truth. There is a version of you, buried deep inside, that would eat the dead to live. Not because you are evil, but because you are alive. The last bodies weren't buried. They were left on the mountain in the snow, beneath makeshift crosses. Not because they were forgotten, but because their presence had become sacred. They were no longer just the dead. They were the reason others had lived. Survivors often say they live for two, for themselves and for the one they consumed. It's not guilt. It's responsibility. A pact sealed not with blood, but with flesh. When they speak about what happened, they choose their words with care. They talk about friendship, faith, brotherhood. But in their silence, there's a shadow, a wound that will never close. Because how do you return to a world of normal meals, small talk, Sunday church, after tasting death like that? The story of Alive isn't just about the past. It's about the thin line we all walk. The quiet truth that modern life tries to hide, that beneath every suit, every prayer, every civilized gesture, there is an animal waiting. That's why this book still haunts us, because it forces us to see that our humanity is not a guarantee, it's a choice we make every day. And in certain moments, in certain mountains, that choice disappears. If you want to understand how far the human will to live can go and what it leaves behind, we recommend another video on this channel, Johnny Got His Gun. It's a different kind of survival. A man with no limbs, no voice, no future, but still alive. If this video disturbed you, share it. Not a shock, but to awaken. There are stories that aren't meant to be forgotten, and this is one of them. And if you want to read the full account, raw and unfiltered, The book Alive is available in the link below. Just know, you won't come back from it the same.